Good morning, Christ Central. Today I'm doing the devotion, and our passage is 2 Corinthians 8, 1-7. So I'll just start with prayer before we go. Dear Lord, thank you for this morning. Thank you that for some of us it's a sunny morning, and thank you for all of us. It's another day where we can be with you. Amen. The passage goes like this. And now, brothers, we want you to know about the grace that God has given the Macedonian churches. Out of the most severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability, entirely on their own. They urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the saints. And they did not do as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord and then to us, in keeping with God's will. So we urged Titus, since he had earlier made a beginning, to bring also to completion this act of grace on your part. But just as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in your love for us, see that you also excel in the grace of giving. I'm not sure why the Macedonians were so poor in comparison with the Corinthians. Corinth was a city with a long history, but in the form Paul was writing to, the city was virtually new. It had been destroyed by the Romans in 143 BC, left abandoned for 100 years and refounded in 44 BC. And it was a very cosmopolitan place. There was a mixed population of Greeks, of Jews, and also of retired Roman soldiers, because it was a colony. So you do your time in the Roman army and you get land in a colony to farm. That's the deal when you sign up. And it's one of the richest cities in southern Greece. So yes, probably the church in Corinth had reasonably wealthy members. But I'm not sure why the Macedonians were so poor, because Macedonia, although it was on the periphery of classical Greece, it was also the place that Alexander the Great had come from. So from being this sort of place in about the 4th century BC, where, like, on the edge, Hicksville, it had become the center of Greece in the later classical period and remained so into Roman times. So it wasn't a particularly poor part of the empire, but it was an agricultural province. So maybe there was a few really rich landowners and lots of relatively poor peasants. I don't know, but they were poor. And they might have been poor, but they were really good at giving. And Paul is commending them for this. And what he's really doing is shaming the Corinthians to do likewise, quite blatantly, really. But I've noticed that people with less are often more generous than people who have more. Giving is a spiritual gift too, but I don't think it only applies to people who have the gift of giving. It's something we all need to do. We all need to give. And Jesus talks a lot about giving. He talks an awful lot about money. And he says a number of things. He says it should be proportional to your wealth, and it's not the amount you give he cares about, but the amount it costs. So he praises the widow who just gives a few coins but can't really afford to, while he tells the rich man who comes to him to sell absolutely everything he owns. He expects us to give. It's not an optional thing. He says things like, when you give, not if you give. And he expects giving to be sacrificial. We don't give what we can spare, we give what we are called to, even if it means having less ourselves and having to go without some things. And he wants us to do it cheerfully, not reluctantly. Over the years, as I grow richer, which is mainly due to being married to Claire, who is very, very good with money, I find it gets harder to part with my money. It's a scary thing, because what came easily when I had little begins to harder when I have more and have more to give. And that's worrying. But when I do give, it feels good. And I'm sure that being generous with money and time is a thing that is good for me to do, in that it nourishes my soul. And I think if Jesus's words are anything to go by, it's a core activity for us as Christians. It's part of our worship, and it's an important part. So I think, have a think through today. Is giving something that you do willingly or through gritted teeth? Do you need to be honest with yourself and Jesus about your attitude to money? Do you need to give more than you are giving currently? And we're entering a time of economic hardship. There might be many of us in the church who lose their jobs, and it's already happening to some. And those of us who will still be paid need to be generous and supportive to those who are not. And we may find that there are new calls on us to be more generous than we have in the past, that God is making on us, and we're going to have to meet. So I'd like us to pray for those in the church and known to us who are in need of financial support at the moment, and to pray that individually and collectively we will be generous, both supporting the mission and work of the church and of our brothers and our sisters who are in need.